Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon to all of you who have been with us since we began this this session a couple of hours ago. And also welcome to anybody who might have joined, particularly for this panel. I'm glad that you're all here, that you're going to join us for what I'm certain is going to be an insightful discussion and hopefully inquisitive as well. A real look at how the emerging Europe region can continue to collaborate with the United Kingdom in the field of healthcare, particularly innovation, because obviously that's something that emerging Europe excels in. And all of this, despite the UK having to, all intents and purposes, shot itself in the foot, as it were, by leaving the European Union. My name is Craig Turp. I'm the editor of Emerging Europe, and I'm delighted to be joined today by, what I can only describe as a stellar panel of highly qualified guests. And I think it would be, appropriate to introduce them briefly. So, I'll begin in Estonia, I believe, with Jānis. Is that right? Are you in Estonia? Jānis is chairman, Life and Health Science Meta Cluster Scan Bolt, and he's also a board member of the Tartu Biotechnology. Sorry, Biotechnology Park. Yeah, I do apologise, Jānis. And in Poland, am I right? We've got Ligia Kornowska, who is the managing director of the Polish Health Federation and leader of the AI in Healthcare Coalition. And then we have Sarah Korczmaros, who is in London. Are you not?
Yes, I am. Hi, Craig.
Indeed. She's the CEO and co-founder of C-Lab Ventures. And then finally, we have Robert Mullen, who's the health tech lead at Tech London Advocates. So, by way of introduction, Brexit or not, the UK is an important player in, the health tech field, as it is in, so many areas of all sorts of industry. And emerging Europe, the region that, obviously we're particularly concerned with, that has an abundant pool of highly skilled talent. And, the two have until now, been able to collaborate very, very well. And so, one of the things that we want to look at today is to how we can continue that and how we can even, improve it, how we can make things work a little bit better. So I think, Robert, as you're in London, and obviously representing Tech London Advocates, I think I'll come to you to start things off, to give us an overview, if you can, of the view from London, as it were, post Brexit. What's the feeling in the health tech community right now? Have there been any problems that people in your network have encountered since January? I know that there have been problems in the trade of goods and everything, but in the field of health tech, what's been the experience so far?
Part of what's happened in terms of the last year has been, in some ways, a strong acceleration of digitalization within the NHS in a way that I think would not have happened. Probably it would have taken at least 5 years to get to where the system has been forced to get to. And so, in a context where we have had lots of harm done by COVID, I think that actually is some area of benefit. I think more generally, notwithstanding Brexit, that the opportunities for cross-border collaboration continue in the health tech space. First of all, it looks highly likely that the UK will be participating in Horizon. I'm told that the papers haven't been signed yet, but that will continue. The immigration arrangements, as I understand them, will continue to be favorable in terms of EU founders of startups, tech startups coming to the UK. And I think the UK continues to be a good place, particularly for trials and for interaction with the private sector. I have to say I am generally negative about startups trying to sell to the NHS until they have already had some success in the private sector, and I don't see that as changing. I think while the NHS is trying to do things to become more startup friendly, it's still not a very good place for European health tech startups to think about as a customer. But there is a large private medical community here, and it's getting even larger. I mean, the Cleveland Clinic is going to be opening shortly. One Welbeck has opened. There are lots of opportunities for companies to engage with the private sector, and because that sector services the Middle East and other places, it's a big market.
Just following up on your point, a general point, if you like, about the NHS. I mean, do you think that in the UK, it's kind of stifled somewhat innovation?
It's a problem from a customer standpoint. It's a problem for UK health tech startups as well. And the problem is not centralization or concentration. Actually, the problem, in fact, is the reverse. It's that the system that we've had is fragmented, and therefore selling effectively to each trust is like a separate corporate sale. And there hasn't been a lot of willingness of Trust 1 to effectively rely on the experience of Trust 2 in deciding to buy something or not buy something. I'm involved as a mentor with the NHS Innovation Accelerator, and it's expressly aimed at trying to help companies that are already selling to a couple of trusts to reach a scale with other trusts. But it's a difficult process, and it's going to take a long time, I think, for the NHS to turn around in that way.
Okay, I'm going to come to Ligia now, and just basically to ask you, kind of the same question, but from your side of the fence, as it were. Obviously you're there in Poland, and you're the MD of the Polish Hospital Federation. What kind of collaboration have you had with the UK until now? I mean, has there been any? What kind of thing have you been doing? And has Brexit affected that at all?
Thank you for that question. Thank you for the invitation on that conference. Firstly, I think it's really important to speak about innovation in healthcare on the European or even global level, because like after digitization, we all will be one global village, and it impacts healthcare sector too. So I would like to say a little about Polish healthcare sector and how we managed to change our approach to this telemedical and new technologies approach. And we have that situation that actually before pandemic, 100% of our healthcare services paid by National Health Fund was provided in person. So after around 1 or 2 months of pandemic, we changed our approach completely, and 80% of healthcare consultations were telemedical consultations. And in the overall, I think we managed to change our healthcare to this telemedical healthcare, although we face some troubles. And I think these troubles are like similar to troubles that other countries are facing, including UK's. And I think, for example, that we should think more about cybersecurity and understand that electronic health records need different approach that privacy of paper health records. And not everybody in our system understands it, and it may occur that we'll have huge issues in proper protection of this data. And secondly, we actually went from one extreme to another, and after 1 year of providing this healthcare services almost 100% telemedically, especially when it comes to primary care entities, now our government and our society are asking, is it a proper approach? And actually there are some laws about how to restrict telemedical consultations paid by National Health Fund. So we as a Poland have to find somehow a balance in this all digitization in healthcare, and I think that we can learn from, for example, from the UK's approach when it comes to new technologies in medicine. And I'm personally really impressed by NHS-X organization. That organization creates strategies for implementing telemedicine, and artificial intelligence algorithms in medicine and others technologies. And actually, we try to learn from your experience, from your perspective, and we really need this new refreshing approach and this new point of view. So, for example, I'm personally responsible for creating a chapter about artificial intelligence and big data in e-health strategy for Poland for 2021-2026. And I actually was, how to say it, inspired by your papers about, like UK's papers about artificial intelligence. So I believe that this cooperation on European level or even on the global level is crucial to make this step towards digitization in healthcare.
Well, I think, when it comes to digitalization, it's probably the perfect time to talk to Janis, who is obviously in Estonia, which is a leader, not just in digitalization of healthcare, but in so many fields of digitalization. There has been an impression that this, the COVID-19 crisis in particular, it's something that has allowed Estonia to, export, as it were, its model in so many ways. People have been looking to Estonia and seeing that, a number of the things, Ligia just mentioned, telemedicine, this kind of thing, that these things were already in place in Estonia. I mean, is that true? Should we believe the hype, as it were?
Well, thank you. So if we take the telemedicine, so we have to say that this was not widely sort of penetrated in Estonian system, but if we take a digitalization as such, and so authentication and using, for example, or looking for new innovative way to look for personal medicine and data, this has been, of course, already ongoing for many years. And if we have a genome bank, which is actually started the same time as UK Biobank in late 90s, and now we have like 20% of the population has actually in this data set with actually health data connected to this by the wide informed and blanket informed consent. And of course, what is specific in Estonia that we have a possibility to do nearly everything online. So I mean to identify ourselves with several different ways, either mobile ID or ID chip card, or we have a special way is a smart ID, which is similar to mobile ID. So we in Estonia say that you only two things you cannot do online. It's to get married and to buy real estate. Other things you can do all online. Even with close to 40% of people are voting on the general elections online. So this gives us, of course, enormous opportunity. But at the same time, we have to say that we would like to be further in the actually digitization and to providing the special services based on this platform in healthcare. So although we have 100% or prescriptions are e-prescriptions, so and during this COVID, as in most of the countries, the development of teleconsultations were enormous, but still we have a long way to go to actually in normalization of data and to actually make a full data set available online for patients or people. Although we have some good opportunities for people to get the date or time critical data. And some data are available through, we call it the personalized digital record, a health record, which you can get all your prescriptions or some your referral letters, results of referral letters, and discharge notes are all available to not only to the people but to the doctors, unless the person itself, his or herself, is not closing this data. For some doctors, for example, this is opportunity. And this means that all people have, or persons have, control over their data. But of course, what we are looking now is to actually change the way how the medicine is practiced, not only to make teleconsultations, but to bring in digital support systems, to change the platforms, or to implement platforms to actually use data and use AI in actually making healthcare more efficient. For example, in mental health care, there is a company which will now pilot next year nationwide with one of the biggest healthcare provider and national healthcare insurance to implement this system to integrate primary healthcare, specialized healthcare, and to allow people to enter to the system by using triage app, which actually gives the first sort of 3-level help or support to the person. Either this condition can be treated by the simple self-aid apps or other means, or its referral should be preferably to the primary healthcare level or to the specialist care. And then through this app, they can actually make appointment. And the next level, the same app will be a platform, or the same platform and system will be also used by doctors or mental health nurses to actually make it more sort of precise diagnostic process, and also to use the existing guidelines to ordinate treatment, and then back to the follow-up. This is one example where we would like to see, and we obviously will see, much more efficient care delivery and much better quality. So this is just one example, but there is ample of this kind of projects ongoing. Or the other example is to use genomic data to actually assess the risks, for example, in cardiovascular disease, to actually specify the risk groups based on the genetic profile or the breast cancer. This is like what we want to use, actually data to change the way how the healthcare is practiced.
Okay, I'm going to come to you now, Sarah. I mean, there's been a lot of talk already about data. I mean, how important is it to you and what you do? I mean, obviously, with C-Lab, you're involved particularly with cancer and, early diagnosis. I mean, it's crucial, no?
No, absolutely, and I really see like the future of collaboration in sharing data between the two regions. So I think it's very important to not just to find ways, but also to provide a platform to enable this data sharing. And actually, one area that I'm personally very excited and intrigued about, how blockchain will be used in healthcare. So building on Janu's point about data sharing and how we can access data, I think blockchain is something that we have to look at. So far, it's mainly been the privilege of fintechs, but now we can see more and more healthcare solutions building on existing blockchain technologies. So researchers.
But how, sorry to interrupt, but how, how prevalent is blockchain in health tech at the moment? I mean, how many, firms are using it? Is it something that's, still in a very incipient stage, or are there already firms who are, deploying it, further down the line?
I think it is a fair question, because there are, obviously, it's still like trying out technologies, but there are companies now can use it to provide a very high level of privacy and security for the stakeholders. So there are some companies, I mean, that's when startups come into the picture, because obviously we can't reform the whole system through starting from NHS or starting from bigger public healthcare systems. And I think there is still a lot to do on this area, but once we have it, we can use it for addressing healthcare management's most pressing challenges. also vaccination records, or even the supply chain of drugs. I mean, it can be a massive help to reduce the risk of counterfeit of medicines, which is a major concern, especially if you talk about export and import of medical products between EU countries and the UK. So blockchains.
Sorry, go on, Ligia.
If I can, if I can add something to that, because we as a Polish Hospital Federation and for other organizations with EIT Health, for example, are creating now that data donation scheme. We run that project that, like we created a trusted third party, a Donate Your Data Foundation, that will actually use blockchain technology to get the consent from patients for sharing their data. So we believe that blockchain technology is the most transparent and safe for the data. So we use it in our foundation, and probably in 6-7 months, I may tell something more, because we will run some education campaigns for patients about donating their data, because it's like a new way of donation, like donating blood or donating marrow. They can now donate their data, and it's also so important for creating new technologies. So we are doing it, and we use blockchain technology. So yeah,
it's great to hear.
All right, Robert, I'm going to come back to you. I mean, Ligia there just mentioned, COVID passports. I mean, yesterday the European Union came up with its own proposal for what it wants to do, and obviously the UK was left out. It wasn't, invited, as it were, to be a part of this scheme. I mean, is this a bad sign of things to come? I mean, there's been a bit of bad blood recently. We know with the controversy over the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine and supplies and that kind of thing. You mentioned that the UK has so far, although it's pulled out of Erasmus, it's probably going to stay in Horizon. So there are some signs that the UK is still willing to engage, as it were, but there are also some other signs that the UK might not. I mean, how do you see it?
Sorry, was this addressed to me?
No, to Robert, sorry.
Okay.
Robert in the UK, sorry.
Yeah, no. Look, I think we are still in a post-Brexit period where there is a high level of jockeying going on at a political level, and that has, I think, been exacerbated by the current crisis and by the issues with vaccination and trade and some other things. I think it's very hard to reach a conclusion as to how that's going to settle out for some period of time till we revert to something that looks rather more like normal. From the standpoint of the vaccination passport, since a lot of the European countries and the Mediterranean European countries are actually dependent on UK travelers effectively to support their economy, and in fact, Greece has made it clear that they say the UK is the first country that they want to open up to in terms of travelers. One suspects that this is going to be something that's going to get worked out because there's a commercial reason to work it out. But that's not to say that there won't be some political posturing before.
Okay. Yanis, I want to come back to you a little bit, to touch on this question of data, because one of the things that, we have to take into consideration when we start, donating health data, as Sarah mentioned, is the question of trust, and people need to trust that data is not going to be misused in any way. And obviously, Estonia is another, this is another chance for Estonia to be a positive example, is it not? Because Estonia has already crossed this bridge in persuading people, its own citizens, to trust the state with its data, because it built, the X road, the whole, infrastructure that backs up the whole Estonia infrastructure. So, are there any, lessons that could be learned from Estonia in terms of how we can convince people to trust, to trust, institutions with their data?
So you know how it started in Estonia. It wasn't from the beginning that people were actually trusting government. They were trusting.
It had to be done over time, yeah.
But how it started was it started everything from government was planning to or issuing ID, the sort of chip cards, ID, electronic cards. And this was not something unique. It was already done in Finland, for example, for years. But in Estonia, it was made somehow semi-compulsory because of banks were taking it over. They started to help government to issue them. And then banks decided that this is a good way to make their activities and operations more efficient, to bring banking online and to actually enable people to actually authorize the payments and to actually authorize all the activities. And if this was taken over by banks, then the government made more and more services available. And then it was like nearly compulsory. Now 95% of people are using these ID cards, and 40% of people are using mobile IDs. And there has been any major data breaches or security breaches. So even there has been one case where there was some problems or potential problems with the algorithm was by the provider of the chip card, ID chip card, and this was actually handled very smoothly by the government. So that's why I think if we would have any major data leaks and data problems, then it might be also not so easy and smooth for Estonia. The other question might be that when there was a lot of sort of ransom hacking problems in other countries, also in UK, in healthcare, as we know, then Estonia was not targeted, or there was they tried the villains, but due to this, that most of Estonians were using this everyday life, this actually identification and this blockchain already, then it meant that the software that people were using in their and offices and businesses were using had to be already updated on the latest level, because the systems didn't work on the old software, and this actually saved us from a lot of problems. So it's not just one step; it's a process and whole complex. But yeah, we were lucky that it was taken up, and the government was smart enough to actually build on this platform and providing new services. And I think one of the main reasons why we were taking this, that we were a poor country, and we couldn't afford to actually to develop the old-time bureaucratic governance system in the country. So we were looking more smarter ways to actually be more efficient. So, but if we speak about data now, I think the next step, what we are looking not only in Estonia but through Scanbout, is to support the activities on the common European data space. Or there's another common European data space, not only in health but other areas. But we are looking more specifically in health data, because this enables for health data primary and secondary use, which is utmost important to make actually this data available for not only for research but also for people who are crossing border for actually business or for leisure. And this makes also healthcare quality much higher and can actually help people to get healthcare in other countries smoothly and without any problems. But this I see might be a problem if we look to the UK. If UK will be not the part of this common data space, there will be obviously problems to share data and not and also to conduct the research, either commercial or academic research, if we cannot actually share health data for this purpose.
Okay, thanks. Sarah, I'm going to come back to you now and kind of, looking a bit more towards the future in terms of, what happens post-COVID and, the lessons that we can learn from it. I suppose the most pertinent question would probably be, are we actually going to learn anything from this? Because we've heard a lot from governments, from NGOs, from all sorts of organizations, telling us that, this can never happen again. We're going to put lots of fantastic systems in place to make sure that, it can't happen again, to make sure that we're better prepared, and not just in terms of, viruses, but also in terms of, other illnesses such as, cancer, in terms of making sure that, things are diagnosed a lot earlier. I mean, are you optimistic that, all of these, great ideas that are being spoken about at the moment are actually going to come through?
Yeah, so I think it can't be argued that the pandemic had put an unprecedented strain on the European healthcare systems. And it also created an enormous backlog in many therapeutic areas, such as cancer. Which is my main focus. But because of this, there's no wonder why the pandemic has also been a catalyst for innovation in the healthcare industry, especially. So I do believe that we learn our lessons also when it comes to other areas like cancer, because at the moment, Macmillan reckons that there are 50,000 missing diagnoses compared to last year, which means that people
are missing regular scans or regular appointments.
Unfortunately, it doesn't mean that we are diagnosing or there are less cancer in the population. It means that we don't have the resources to diagnose the disease in time, and at the same time, around 50% have also experienced disruption in their therapy. So by maybe just allocating the resources better, we can learn how to balance it, because we might have to live with such pandemics. But it also comes down to data again, because I believe data is not only about innovation, but also about how to basically inform decision makers how to allocate the resources in healthcare systems, hence building more efficient, more sustainable healthcare systems in general. So I mean, I'm utterly optimistic about the future when it comes to funding, especially in healthcare. So we can see growth in both public and private funding. So obviously governments are really keen to show and place bigger budgets for the following years in healthcare, but also private investors. So there is a wave of funding for healthcare startups, digital startups, and other solutions, which shows investors' appetite in the healthcare innovation.
Yeah, I mean, I saw you nodding there, Ligia. So I'll come to you next. I mean, this question of funding, it kind of goes back to the question I originally asked Sarah. In terms of there have been lots of promises about there's going to be more funding, there's going to be more resources made available. I mean, are you equally confident that this will actually happen? How are things in Poland? How is the healthcare? Not necessarily is how's it funded, but have there been more promises of funding in Poland?
Okay, so I am generally an optimist, so I hope that there will be more funding for that, and for developing new technologies, and for like fitting to this new world when it comes to healthcare sector. But when we talk about facts, Poland is one of the countries that spent like couple times less on new technologies in medicine. For example, when we think about how much spends Europe or United States on this digitization technologies in healthcare. So we have a huge room for improvement, actually, and I believe that we will learn from that pandemic, and that we will learn that we actually can't afford not to develop and implement new technologies, and that we should do that step by step without forgetting about these crucial things like cybersecurity or, for example, professional healthcare's education, how to use these new technologies. So yes, I hope that we will learn our lesson and we'll spend more on the healthcare in general.
And are there any specific areas where we should be concentrating resources? Where should they be going? I mean, they're obviously there might be more than there was before COVID, but they're still not going to be infinite. Startups, healthcare services, they're still not going to get all that they want. So where should those resources be concentrated?
Yeah, I think that they should be concentrated on artificial intelligence in medicine. And when I say AI, I think about access to the data too, because AI is built by medical data, and not only an AI, but personalized healthcare or new drugs, etc. So AI and medical data. And I believe that, for example, in 5 or 7 years, it will be actually medical malpractice not to use AI algorithms so when it comes to diagnosing and treating patients, because they are more and more effective and they are more and more safe for the patient. So I think this is the one part of the sector we should focus on. And actually, we can't do it alone as one country, right? We have to cooperate with, I believe that we should cooperate with whole European Union, because we can't
and with the UK as well.
Yes, and with the UK, and without it we can't compete with the United States or Asia or yeah. So cooperation is crucial here.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you, Robert, for one final point before I go to a question that we've had on the feed here. But I'd just like to ask you. I mean, obviously you represent, Tech London advocates. All of the tech advocate networks. I mean, they have a role to play, as it were, in making sure that organisations in the EU don't forget about London. I mean, as brief as you can, how are you going to try and make that happen?
Look, I think first of all, from the standpoint of financing for health tech and med tech, London is still probably the strongest market in the UK. Within, it's not strong enough. I mentor startups and in the health tech space, and I'm both in the UK and across Europe and Israel. And I'm continually frustrated that with companies that I know if I were in the US, I would be able to get funding for, that I find hard, particularly at early stage, to get funding for here. And we're still seeing certainly continental European companies coming here for funding, because while it's mediocre here, it's even worse, I think, in some areas on the continent in terms of equity funding. The grant funding position actually is better in some countries on the continent, but the equity funding is generally worse. So I think there is a big role to be played across both the EU and the UK together in terms of trying to build, particularly at early stage, a better funding set of opportunities for promising technologies. And for me, particularly in the diagnostic space, healthcare is very expensive, and as we can see by looking at the model in the United States, it's getting even more expensive with personalized medicine. And the only way really to deal with that, I think, is through a focus on diagnostics at early stage and catching things like cancer in particular at a stage before they become expensive to treat. And so I would hope, particularly in that area, that we can have more focus and funding for the various kinds of tests. And some of that does involve AI, and some of it is biomarkers and other things. Is that responsive to your question?
It is. It is. Let me quickly get the one question in that we've had. Anybody can answer this briefly. It's from Dan Fairhenya. Apologies for pronunciation. Don't consultants and doctors prefer to meet patients, especially new ones, at their practices? Who wants to quickly answer that?
Yeah, I think the answer is, of course they do. But I think what we've discovered through this process is that there is a possibility for a mixture. I mean, I recently had a medical examination where my first contact with the physician was telemedicine, and that was perfectly fine. Then some tests were done. That was very efficient. Some tests were done, and then the final consultation was in person. I think we'll wind up with a hybrid system.
All right, that's great. All right, we have to close it there. Unfortunately, we could have gone on for much longer, but thank you everybody for your time, and it's been a great discussion, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you everybody who tuned in to watch, and I believe Andrew Roble will be making some closing comments about today's event in I think 5 minutes time. So thank you
very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
A very warm thank you to all the participants for all the insights, and Craig, thank you very much for chairing the session. We have talked about trade and investment, fintech and health tech, and it seems that it will take a bit longer to see how the relations between the emerging Europe region and the UK will evolve. We can clearly see that the pandemic has not only sped up innovation, but also changed how we work and live and see our future. We are going to be back in the UK discussing the relations between the UK and emerging Europe next year. With our Towards 2030 program. In the meantime, join us on April 29th to explore the relations between emerging Europe and the Asian Tigers, which we are organizing in collaboration with Money Today, the largest media platform in South Korea. In the meantime, you can stay on Hopin and network virtually. The virtual networking area is open for the next 1.5 hours. So thank you very much for joining us today, and see you on the 29th of April, Emerging Europe and the Asian Tigers.